Are you bored of plain old plastic eggs for Easter? Are you hunting for something new? Maybe something a bit different? I've got about a dozen new and egg-citing ways to decorate those plastic Easter eggs. These are so pretty, you'll want to keep them on display all year long and not just for Easter. To start, let's chat a little bit about eggs. These eggs are from Dollarama and they are actually plastic. They have a really similar look and feel to actual eggs, sort of the same kind of texture. And the thing I like the most about these eggs is that they don't have an obvious seam, which makes them much better for decorating. These eggs come in two sizes, the regular dozen and a larger 4-pack. So let's grab an egg and get crackin'. This is a wrap technique that I use with alcohol inks. I've used it on a lot of projects and I'm interested to see how it'll work on these Easter eggs. We're going to need a piece of cellophane wrap large enough to cover the egg. We're going to be using alcohol ink. I'm going to start out with indigo blue and magenta. Let's start by adding a few random drops of the blue ink and then the magenta. You don't need a ton of ink for this, just enough to cover the egg. Then wrap the egg in the cellophane, although I did notice I didn't have quite enough ink coverage, so I added a few more drops to the edge and wrapped it all up, twisted it, and let dry. Normally I let these dry overnight. This one I unwrapped a little bit too early as it was still a bit wet. Check out those beautiful colors. This egg has the look of velvet. Here is another version using slightly different colors. In this version, I've used teal, white, gold, and indigo. Place your Easter egg, and as before, wrap, twist, and let dry, preferably overnight. For this technique, we're going to add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to move the inks around. We're going to use just a little bit. I usually put it in this little wine glass, don't drink it, and then I'm using these little pipettes to squeeze out as much alcohol as needed. I'm using one of the plastic Dollarama eggs and I have placed it in a little plastic tray. I'm going to be using a straw to move the ink around the surface of the egg, and as you can see, I'm wearing rubber gloves just to keep the alcohol ink off my skin as it has a tendency to stain. To start, I'm adding a little bit of alcohol to the surface of the egg, and then I've added some ink and I'm going to just blow that around a little bit using the straw. Next, I'm going to add a secondary color. This is magenta. I'm just going to add a few drops here and there. Then I'm adding some more alcohol and I'm going to blow through the straw to blend the colors together. Here I'm going to flip it to the other side, take a look at what the underside looks like, and then I'm going to flip it over and do a little work on the other side. And keep in mind when you're using alcohol ink, sometimes less is more. If you mix too many colors and you add too much ink, you're going to end up with mud brown. And also it's always really nice if you leave a little bit of white space in your design. And here is what the egg looks like after it's dried overnight. Here is the same technique using a bit of a different color palette. I'm reusing the plastic pan from the previous egg, but my color palette for this version is yellow and magenta. To make our next Easter egg, I'm using the same technique as before, only I'm applying the colors from the top of the egg, which will give us a slightly different finish. The colors I used for this egg are teal, indigo, white, and gold. I'm adding hot glue for this Easter egg. Since these eggs are hard plastic, they won't melt under the hot glue like the foam eggs do. My original intent here was actually to block out some white spaces using the glue, and then I was going to peel it off after I applied the ink. However, it didn't quite work out that way. So here I am just adding some yellow, the yellow and the magenta, which I thought were a pretty pleasing color palette. And I'm just doing the same technique as before, where I'm adding the ink and the alcohol and using a straw to move the inks around and combine them. So once the ink was all dry, my plan was to remove the hot glue just using an X-Acto blade to pop it off. However, it stuck really well to the egg and did not want to come off, so I decided to just leave it. I still think it makes a pretty cool design. I think it really has the look of fire, which is why I named it my fire egg. This little white egg got a nice coat of black acrylic paint. I've attached the egg to a skewer for easier maneuverability. I'm using a small sponge brush. So I'm starting by adding a little bit of blue, and the trick with these Galaxy Easter eggs is just to add the color sort of randomly. You don't want to cover everything. You want it to, well, basically have the appearance of space. I have linked all of my colors that I've used in the description box below, so if you're looking for that information, that's where it will be. Once I was happy with the amount of coverage of that color, I lightly blotted it off using a piece of paper towel. I'm adding purple, and some of it is overlapping the blue and some of it is not. Just randomly apply it until you're happy with the way it looks. Overall, I'm leaving a little bit more color on the bottom of the egg and a bit more black towards the top of the egg. So here's the blue and the purple, and same with the last application. Between coats, I'm blotting it lightly using a paper towel. Very lightly, just giving it a little touch to take off any wet excess paint. And the next color is gold. Here's our galaxy egg so far. Next we have to add stars. There's just a small amount of white acrylic paint in this bowl, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it, and then I'm going to just mix it up using a wooden stir stick. And here's a quick demo of how this works. We're just going to use a toothbrush, hopefully one that's clean, and we're going to dip it in the paint. And I actually found afterwards this works out much better if you blot it first. Otherwise your stars might end up a bit too big or even oblong, which isn't really what you want. Now to try it on our egg. So as I mentioned, I'm going to blot off the excess paint from the toothbrush and move in close. And we're just going to flick that paintbrush ever so slightly to get those nice little stars on our galaxy. You can add as many stars as makes you happy. For this egg, we're going to use some metallic nail polish. This is a technique that I love and use on lots of different projects. For this technique, you're going to need fairly runny nail polish. Old, gloppy nail polish won't work. So you want to get the nail polish kind of running before you put it over the egg. And here's how it looked on the other side. Oh, and just one more thing, make sure the nail polish is good and dry before you handle the egg or you'll ruin your design. And I think the results are quite stunning. Here's some pretty blue ribbon that I picked up at Walmart, only $1 for 10 meters. I'm starting by attaching the ribbon to one end of the egg and running matching the existing seam. For this Easter egg technique, we're just going to wind the ribbon around the length of the egg, overlapping on the ends and going on opposing sides. If you find you're getting a little bit of white space showing through, just push the ribbon back together. I did my egg in sections. Once I felt like I had a sufficient amount covered, I actually cut the ribbon, glued it down to the bottom of the Easter egg, and then reattached it and went in the center of the white section to start the next section. And that's how you make a blue ribbon robin's egg. For this egg, I'm using these iridescent flower sequins that I picked up at Dollarama. I chose this blue plastic egg because the color matched really closely with the sequins, so that if there was any little gaps or spaces, you wouldn't see white, you'd just see the same color through. I'm gluing the egg closed because I won't be opening it up once it's covered in sequins. I'm starting by applying the first row right along the seam to reinforce that closure, and I'm just using a pretty thick line of hot glue. You don't want to go all the way around because the glue will dry out before you get all the sequins attached. So just do a small section at a time, and I found that it was much easier if you arrange the sequins so that they're face up for grabbing. They're hard to grab when they're upside down before the glue dries. And then just continue adding the sequins until you make it all the way around the egg. And here is the first row. Move on to the next row and then just continue adding sequins around the circumference of the egg. Here's what the egg looks like when it's more than halfway done. And here we are at the finish line with just that one final sequin to add on the very bottom. Look at that pretty sparkly goodness. Those iridescent colors are the reason I chose these sequins. For this next project, I'm going to use these slightly larger eggs. I wanted to use these fun butterfly stickers for this Easter egg. I jotted down a couple little dots with my pencil to note where my ink should start for the butterfly. To keep my egg from rolling around while I was applying ink, I used a piece of masking tape to secure it to the bottom of my little Dollar Tree plastic container. Time to add some color. I'm starting with teal. As with some of my previous alcohol ink Easter eggs, I'm using alcohol as well as the ink and using a straw to move the ink around the surface of the egg. I'm trying to keep most of the ink going to the sides to mimic the butterfly's wings. Here's what the egg looks like when the ink is all dry. Notice how it has a drippy texture going down the sides. Time to add our butterfly sticker. I'm just choosing which butterfly I want to use. The nice thing about these stickers is that they're see-through, so it allows you to see the ink through the butterfly design, and also they're easy to apply and work well with the curvature of the egg. If you make a mistake, you can actually peel this off and it won't mess up the inks. Once again, I've painted my white Easter egg with a coat of black acrylic paint. I'm using a skewer so that the egg is easier to maneuver. The entire egg is getting a coat of Mod Podge. I'm using this chunky black iridescent glitter that I bought from Amazon. I've got a link in my description box. Note that I'm doing this on top of a paper plate. I started out using the sprinkling section of the lid, but that wasn't working well, so I flipped it to the open side and just poured it on. Making sure to get the very top and the very bottom of the Easter egg. I also rolled the egg to make sure it had good coverage, and then I patted off any areas where it looked like there were sequins sticking up. The nice thing about these sequins is that they're very flat and they really maintain the shape of the egg nicely. Check out those beautiful colors. I'm using one of the larger sized eggs for this project, and I started by giving it a coat of Rust-Oleum in Pearl Mist. I'm using these beautiful pearl and gold stickers to outline the edge of the egg. I'm lining up the trim with the seam of the egg to ensure that my trim stays nice and straight and properly centered. Almost the perfect amount. No worries, we can add those couple little links in later. Here's what it looks like from the side and the front. Now it's time to add some decorations. I'm using an assortment of paper flowers on this project that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and Dollarama. To start, I'm removing the wire stems. Don't clip them too close or the flowers will fall apart. I'm attaching everything using hot glue. And then I just continued to add flowers as I worked my way along. I found it was easiest to place the flowers dry and decide where you want them before adhering them using the hot glue. And I also tucked in a few pearls here and there using the same color palette. Pay attention to where the thread hole on the beading pearls goes and turn it away so that you can't see it. Now it's just a matter of adding flowers and beads where you like them. As I said, it's easiest if you dry fit them first and then glue them into place. Just keep doing this until you're pleased with the way it looks. Just one more final touch to make it perfect. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to deal with that little space at the bottom of our egg. Just going to cut another section too long and just stick it in there. You might have to smush it up a little bit to make it fit. This is the perfect Easter egg for those of you who like the romantic look. Before you go, let's vote. Wait, before you go, are you a little bit worried about putting all your eggs in one basket? Well, don't be, because I've got another video for you right here. I hope you enjoy it even more than you enjoyed this video. Have a great day.